Let us get an overview of supported data types in Postgres. Here is the sample create table command for the review. The table name is nothing but users. Columns are specified as part of the circular brackets. There are 10 columns starting from user ID till last updated timestamp. The column names are typically followed by data types. In this case, serial is data type for user ID. Timestamp is data type for last updated TS. Varchar of 30 is data type for user first name. While creating tables in RDBMS databases, we should specify data types for the columns as highlighted earlier. When it comes to serial type, it is nothing but integer which is populated by a special database object called as sequence. It is typically used for surrogate primary key. What is surrogate and what is primary key, we will talk about those details at a later point in time. But whenever someone say add a column for a table which is a surrogate primary key, if it is Postgres database, we typically specify the data type as serial. When serial is specified, a sequence with table name underscore serial column underscore sequence naming convention will be created. In our case, it is nothing but users, which is nothing but our table name, underscore user underscore ID, which is nothing but our column name, underscore seq. So this is the name which will be used to create the sequence if we define the column user ID as serial while creating this table users. Int or integer is used to define columns with integer values. Most of the IDs are defined as integer. If you want, you can even specify the data type for columns like phone number, social security number, etc. as integer. However, it is very common to specify the data type for such columns as varchar. Float or double can be used to define columns used to store price, salary, etc. Typically, they will have precision to define how many decimals these columns can have. Varchar with length is used to define variable length columns such as name, email ID, etc. as names can be of different length for different people. Char can be used to define fixed length string columns, single character fields such as gender which store M or F, 3 character days or months, etc. can be defined with char along with the length. Boolean is used to store true and false values. We can also use date or timestamp to store date or time respectively. We can add columns, drop columns, modify columns by changing data types as well as specify default values using alter table command. We will talk about this as part of next topic. Let us perform this task to understand about data types. We will drop and recreate users table with the following details. User ID should be of type integer. User first name and last name should be not null, and also it should contain only alphabets and numbers along with the punctuations. That's where we call them as alphanumeric or string. And the length has to be 30 characters. User email ID is also similar to the last two columns. However, the length can be up to 50 characters. User email validated and is active should be true or false. User password can store up to 200 characters. Typically, when we actually store passwords in the database, we'll store in the encrypted format and we use up to 128 characters. In this case, I'm just specifying 200 characters. And also it can be variable length. Different passwords might be of different length. We need to keep that also in mind while specifying data type for user password. When it comes to user role, it is single character with URA. For now, we will use varchar of 1. The reason why we are using varchar of 1 for user role is that as part of the next topic, we will change the data type to char of 1. Created date has to be not null and the data type has to be date without timestamp. It should be defaulted to system date. Let's load the magic command SQL and create the environment variable database underscore URL with all the information that can be used to connect to the database. Then let's run this command which will facilitate us to connect to the database using database URL and drop the table users. We have to set this because we are using Jupyter based environment and it uses something called as SQL alchemy under the hood, and it is expected to pass this information using this environment variable. That's why we are doing this. If you are using SQL Workbench for the practice, you don't need to worry too much about this database underscore URL. You just have to connect to the database using profile and you should be able to run these commands. As the table is dropped, let's review the create table command. You can see that user ID is of type integer. User first name and last name are of type varchar of 30 and not null because we cannot have null values in these columns. User email ID is of type varchar of 50 and also not null. User email validated and is active are of type boolean. They can have only true or false values in them. User password is of type varchar of 200. User role is for now varchar of 1. We will be changing it to char of 1 as part of the next topic. Created date is of type date with the default current date. If we run this command, it will take care of creating the table. Now you should be able to see the metadata in the table called as information schema.columns. If you say select star from information schema.columns where table name equal to users ordered by ordinal position, it will give us all the metadata related to this table called as users. You have table catalog, which is nothing but the owner using which we have created this table, table name, the table name itself, column name, the columns that are specified as part of the create table command, ordinal position, the position in which the columns are defined while creating the table, then column default, is nullable, data type, so on and so forth. You can get all the information you are looking for from the table columns using this information schema view called as columns. Now I just want to restrict to few columns just to make sure that the most important information is displayed here. On top of table catalog, table name, column name, data type, I also want to see is nullable, column default, character maximum length. If you want to review other information, you can keep on adding those by going through the columns that are there as part of this information schema columns view. Now let's run this and see all the information that can be used to review against our create table command. You can see all the details here. Keep in mind that you always have to specify order by ordinal position to get the columns in the same order in which they are specified as part of create table or alter table commands. Otherwise, our output might be out of the order than what we have specified while creating the tables. Just keep in mind about the relevance of ordinal position and using order by against it. This is how you can create a table with the data types as per the identified text specs as demonstrated here. So this can be considered as the text specs to create the tables. This is how the information will be. Using this information, we have to come up with create table commands, create the tables, and then we have to start using as part of our application development.